Different Perspectives, a new podcast from Affect Autism. ICDL has a number of courses and services coming up that might interest you. You can find out more information about all of these courses and ICDL's DIR Floor Time Certificate courses at icdl.com/courses. Also, check out the upcoming afternoon and evening dates for parent support meetings that I facilitate at the Events tab at affectautism.com, including the first week of the month where we have an expert guest to answer parent questions. Hello, listeners. Welcome back. I'm Daria Brown, and on this week's podcast, I am super excited to have our first parent panel with two parents. Melinda is a seasoned pediatric occupational therapist who has worked with special needs students in a variety of settings, including schools, outpatient clinics, early intervention settings, and hospitals. She is also the mother of an 11-year-old autistic boy with complex challenges. She's here to discuss the balance of being a therapist and mother and what it's like experiencing being on the other side of the IEP table. And also, she wants to discuss the challenges of navigating the complex healthcare system. Leslie has a PhD in behavioral neuroscience psychology, whose doctoral research was based on polyvagal theory, with a focus on how internal regulation relates to higher cognitive skills. She's an associate professor of psychology who teaches developmental psychology, psychology of trauma, and cognitive psychology, and is also the parent of a 6-year-old autistic girl. She is here to discuss the challenges of navigating the education system for her neurodivergent child. The two of these lovely parents met at a live offering of DIR 101 offered by the International Council on Development and Learning, an introduction to DIR and DIR floor time, and they connected over their similar experiences. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I would love to start by having you each tell us about your experience becoming a mother, given this professional experience that you both had in your careers prior to becoming a parent. Would you like to start, Melinda?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Daria. Prior to becoming a parent, as you mentioned, I was an occupational therapist. It was very rewarding to work with a lot of special needs students and children who had so many diverse challenges and diverse ways of learning. And it's always been something I love. I love being with kids. I love working with kids. I love seeing how they respond to various activities and things that I work with them on. And really, as any teacher, I think, would probably say, although I'm a therapist, but the children do teach you as well when you're working with them. So that being said, I thought I knew, and I do know about child development. However, when I became a mom, I as any other therapist could probably relate, and or mom, I was looking for those developmental milestones. I was looking to see, hey, specifically as an OT, how are their fine motor skills? Hey, are they holding this the right way? Hey, are they holding their head up? Hey, are they sitting up at the right time? Are they walking? All those kind of things that a new mom is really excited, especially a first-time mom, because I'm a kind of one and done mom. So it was a first and last for me all the time. So my child's development was progressing pretty well. And then probably around the time when he was about 7, more challenges started to emerge. And of course, that makes sense because then we're entering school, we're entering more independent learning and independent socialization. So as that happened, his challenges became apparent. He actually was recently diagnosed with autism when he was 10. So the other challenges he was diagnosed with were ADHD and anxiety disorder. He also has sensory issues, which as an OT, I am well aware of that. But he's an amazing child. He's an amazing boy. And I'm just saying those things to kind of give you a picture of the challenges that he's dealing with. I'm not going to really go into much detail about all of his challenges because I really want to respect his right to share his story with people in his own way and in his own time. So when I became, like I said, when I became a mom, I thought I knew. I think like many people think, right? And then it was kind of like I was thrown with a curveball because I was like, uh-oh, we have some issues here. So I thought, well, okay, I'm a therapist. I know what to do. I can handle this. And so like most therapists or even moms, I'll just say moms are can-do people. And okay, just tell me what to do. I'm going to do it and I'll make it better and I'll make it right or I'll fix it. And so that's what I thought I was doing. I really made a judgment that might have been a little bit faulty in thinking that I could be my child's therapist, right? And so I thought, let me, do some activities and in fun ways. I mean, it wasn't, a formal thing. It was a mother-child interaction and bonding. However, as he got older, and I was, trying to elicit certain responses and trying to work with him, I found that he was rejecting me specifically being in that role with him. And OTs know a lot about roles, right? And that's part of our job is to work with people in their roles as mom, as child, as student, as learner, whatever. And it took me a while to realize that, hey, Melinda, you're not in the role of therapist here with your child. You're in the role of mom. And that's how he's going to relate to you. He is not going to accept you as his therapist. So that was like a light bulb moment for me, but also like a why didn't I realize that earlier moment as well. So when I realized that, that's when I did pursue getting him more help in the form of OT services that were not provided by me and other services that in the healthcare system. And so that's kind of, and then of course our story went on, but that's kind of the before and after of how I became a mom.
Thank you so much. Leslie?
Thank you, Daria. Thank you for having me. There's so many things with Melinda's story that I connect with. So yes, I have a background. I've always been interested in psychology, and during college, I just started getting interested in brain function and ended up pursuing my master's and PhD in psychology, focused in the behavioral neuroscience stream. And my dissertation work, I got interested in sort of the brain-body connection. And at the time, Porges's polyvagal theory was sort of becoming quite popular. And a lot of people were looking at it with respect to emotions and affect, but in the laboratory where I worked, we were interested in the role in cognition. And so we looked at measures of regulation using a measure of heart rate variability. And we looked at whether baseline heart rate variability or baseline, an indicator of regulation, related to how people did on cognitive tasks that involved memory and attention. And I was really interested in how this works in older adults because we know that there are changes in the autonomic nervous system with age. So I finished my degree and I found a love of teaching. And so I was very fortunate to find a position at a local college and started teaching a variety of courses. And I really loved it. And I got married and we decided, it's time to have a baby. And we had our wonderful daughter. And it was a challenge from the beginning. There were the first word actually that was used to describe her by a doctor was, well, she is vigorous. I just remember that word. We had a tough beginning, which about 6 months in, when we were finally got a diagnosis of reflux and food allergies, we sort of chalked it up to that. But some challenges remained. And I think one story in particular demonstrates it well. I was driving in the car. My husband For some reason, I was sitting in the back with my daughter, and we'd had a nice visit somewhere, and I went to put my hand on her gently, and she took my hand and pushed it away. She was a little over 1, I think. And I remember it just was one of these things that was just a moment where I just felt, what is wrong with me and why? And I was fortunate enough to know someone at the time who was a speech language therapist. And I just sort of mentioned it in passing. And she said, you might want to try that sort of touch might be uncomfortable to her. You might want to try to touch her with motion or pressure. And I went home and I tried it right away. It was like a huge difference. And it was like the first moment of realizing there's something different here. And it helped me reframe it. And it helped me realize, okay, just because I can't connect with her in this way that I think we're supposed to connect, doesn't mean I can't connect. It means I have to find what's comfortable for her in terms of connecting with me. We received the diagnosis around the age of 4. For me, it was a wonderful thing because it explained so much. It allowed me to reframe so many things that I struggle with on a daily basis. And it allows me to look at, what we often say is, just the behavior, and to step back and say, okay, well, what's this behavior telling me? What's going on? And my daughter has taught me more about regulation than any research paper I've ever read. And she has taught me the importance of co-regulation and the challenges of co-regulating. And I have been where Melinda is. I'm still learning. I'm not her specialist. I am not her therapist, nor can I be. I'm her mom. And that co-regulation piece, it's so powerful, but I understand that as a parent living it day in and day out, it's a tall order because there's times when I'm not regulated. So yes, there are challenges, and every day I get up and I try again.
Thank you both so much. I'm very keen to learn what brought you to Floor Time and to take that DIR 101 course. I can tell from, just some of the words you just said, Leslie, like helping you reframe, learning how to connect with your child as opposed to expecting them to connect a certain way. These are all Floor Time principles, and the whole co-regulation piece. So Melinda, where did you hear about Floor Time, and what made you decide to take the intro course?
Well, I was aware of Floor Time prior to taking the course. I had actually had an experience in a school that I worked in with a Floor Time practitioner. And I had observed them doing Floor Time with a student in the school. And it was interesting how she was working with an autistic student, and she was down on the floor, literally, and almost like her cheek was like laying down on the floor and looking at him like they were both like lying sideways to each other. And I was like, that's interesting. And I asked her a little bit about what she was doing, and she explained to me. And I put that like kind of in my head about, okay, check mark, let's make a note to learn a little more about that. But then, like, as anything, time goes by and you say, okay, I'll learn about that, and I'll take some more continuing ed courses as well, as we have to do as professionals. But the really interesting thing is, in taking this course, is I hadn't really realized the importance of the R part. For me, the R it's all about the R, which is relationship. And I currently do, and have throughout my career, worked with autistic students who are in self-contained classrooms and who aren't in self-contained classrooms. And what I have found in my experience, as well as in my own practice, but also in observing those environments on a regular basis, is that it's very challenging to have that R piece and to work on that relationship piece, because the focus tends to be on the academic issues. And I'm not saying that that's a problem, because that's what school is traditionally for, is academic issues. But what I found interesting was, when I was working with some of these students, even some of the people who are the behaviorists that work with them were like, oh, you need to pair with him. You need to pair. And I'm like, you mean have a relationship with him? Is that what you mean? You know, and so I think, when I hear Leslie speaking about self-regulation, Leslie and I feel like, we connect so well on these issues, because OTs are all about self-regulation, sensory processing, bottom-up approaches rather than top-down approaches. And so I feel a camaraderie with everybody who espouses this approach, right? And when I went to the course, I was like, this is bottom up. This is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's starting at the bottom. It's not starting at the top. It's not expecting, the students or the person or the child, like you had said, Daria, to that, expecting them to change for me. I'm the one who has to change for them. And then maybe we're going to be able to meet somewhere in the middle and work on things that we both can find rewarding and engaging and important. So that's I know it's a long explanation, but that's really what I took out of this course that I did take. I'm so glad I did. And fingers crossed, I hope to take the certificate courses for the full DIR program. I took a lot of courses in sensory integration. I understand that. But for me, it's interesting how the sensory piece can fit into the DIR and how those can work together in tandem. And really, when the combination of those things can work to make a really successful and just, I guess I'm trying to think the word I want to use, but an amazing tool and way of relating to people who have neurodiverse brains. So, why did I take the DIR course when I did? Well, it was offered by the New Jersey Occupational Therapy Association. And in looking more at it and the details of the course, I thought to myself, I have learned about this in the past. I had seen it in implementation in the schools, and it's about time I learned more about it in detail, so I knew really what was going on and really what was happening with these interactions and these techniques.
So it was a combination of interest with the convenience that the association, had it in your email inbox or whatever, and you're like, it's time.
Yeah. Yes.
And how about you, Leslie?
Well, so going back to that story I told about when I, touched my daughter and that person, the speech language therapist, shortly after that, I sort of asked her, could you come over? And she came, and I'm going to be very upfront here that before I had a child, and as someone who has studied psychology, I look back and I was very much a behaviorist. And I assumed that that's what, that's just how I had been taught about learning. That's what Psychology 101 textbooks focus on, or behaviorism. And I still remember the first time that this person came to my house and we were talking. And I remember my daughter was playing in the cabinet with some Tupperware, and this person, said they loved that she was just, and I'm like, yeah, I gave her access to the cabinet. And we were chit-chatting about parenting. And I said, I want to ask you something. I'm just doing a little bit of reading. And so if the child is like behaving in an undesirable way, I shouldn't, or they're, upset and throwing things, I shouldn't ignore them, right? And I look back now at having said that, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, where I have, and I remember she was so gentle in her response to me, because I say it to her now. I'm like, I can't believe I said that. Every time I see her, I'm like, I still can't believe I said that to you. And she said, well, think about it. If you came home from work and you had a bad day and you were really, frustrated, or, and you were whatever, clearly visibly frustrated, and your husband just ignored you, what would that do? And I was like, oh, that would infuriate me. It would make it worse. And so I will say the rest of that visit, she really introduced me to DIR floor time and using affect and meeting the wait, observe, join. My daughter was fascinated with mirrors. Everything was done in the mirror. She'd go up to the mirror with everything and look at it. And I never thought to join her in doing that. I never thought to, it was just, okay, she's in the mirror, she's happy. I never thought to use that as an opportunity to connect with her. And it became one of the best ways that I was able to engage with her emotionally. It was like, oh, you're here too. And it was wonderful. And so we also along the way met a wonderful developmental psychologist who has done started with a bit of theraplay and some parent coaching, but over time has moved really to DIR in terms of her approach. And it's just, all I can describe is when I started using affect, when I started waiting, observing, and joining with my daughter, I just can't describe it, but it was just within a couple months, I would say, I just saw a different child. It was like we unlocked this excited person who all of a sudden really wanted to be with us. As I tell people, I'm like, the proof is in the pudding. I can't describe it. There's something there. And so I have just learned, again, so much. I just find my daughter to be the most fascinating person I've ever met. And the opportunity came to take it. It was just the right time. I had always wanted to do it. One other time something came up, I couldn't. And I also, I guess, I wanted to go in and really understand the developmental capacities, because at times I struggle at this point in her development to connect with her sometimes, because I am neurodivergent myself. And sometimes I can be very literal and very structured about things. And that can be challenging for my daughter at this point. And in terms of what are we going to do together right now? And in terms of me trying to understand how to engage with her, it's different now. It's not as sort of simple as engaging in the mirror. And so I just felt, based on where we were in our relationship, I wanted to understand more about DIR. And because I want to continue to find joy in my relationship with her. And I know that it is up to me as the parent to do that. It is a very tall order, but it's the most important thing. And I guess I've just seen at times when we figure out what it is, what do we need to do, how we're not regulated, what's going on. And when you figure out and you can unlock that, it's just, you can't describe it. It's just wonderful.
I hear so many parents say that, and the experience of so many parents that their child doesn't want to be with them or likes being alone better. And we know that that's not true. They just haven't figured out how to connect with us, or vice versa. And then when you suddenly do, like you said, take those extra steps to make that effort to connect, all of a sudden you see, oh, here's the child has wanted to connect with me all the time. I just wasn't making it possible for them to do it. It's so interesting.
Sometimes we don't know. It's the stress around the house. It's times the parent coaching has been so important, because there have been times where the whole household, the stress is high, and my daughter's psychologist, has repeatedly reminded us, look at what's going on right now in your lives, not just with our daughter, in our lives. And the stress is high right now. When the stress is high, reduce the demands, focus on your relationship, and I need to hear that sometimes, that reminder, because I get, God, it's just, and I get the comparison with where other children are, and the worry, the fear takes over. But if she's not doing this, and she's supposed to be here. And I think one of the most important things I heard at that training, that just, I wrote it down so it's there and it reminds me, is that first capacity, right? The regulation, that is it's a fluid capacity. What a child is capable of today may be different than what that child's capable of tomorrow in terms of regulation, because maybe they didn't sleep well, they're getting sick, there's a stressor. And that has been monumental in terms of helping me shift my perspective on understanding my daughter, and at times pulling back from just viewing it behaviorally and the fear of like, this can't happen and I have to stop this, and realizing something's going on, I have to pull back. I've got to calm things down, and it's then that I can connect, and it's then where things even out. But it's, on a day-to-day basis, it's hard. We get off track sometimes. And so that's why I said every day, I sort of wake up and I try again. And I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive husband and very supportive family, and friends. It is the reason that we are where we are. And I know other people don't have that. And I don't know what you do, because I do think it takes a village, especially.
Well, that segues nicely into what we're going to discuss next, which is the challenges that come up. So I'm going to go to Melinda.
And the challenge for me initially, when I was thinking about talking about the healthcare system, was just even knowing who to call, how to get a referral, how long you're going to have to wait, filling out all the paperwork. It's like applying for a home mortgage if you own a home, like, or if you've ever adopted a child, applying for to adopt a child. It's a huge process, just the paperwork alone. And then when you get the paperwork done and you file it, and you contact who you think is the right person, then they're like, oh, well, we have about a 10-month wait, or we might have a year wait, because, well, and in my case, unfortunately, my son was diagnosed like in 2020 around COVID. So I was like, oh yeah, we have a year wait. And after COVID, unfortunately, as we know, things are still backed up for healthcare. And then also the issue of finding out, oh, your insurance doesn't cover that. And so it's like either out of pocket or nothing, but the out of pocket expense is way too expensive and you just can't afford it. I mean, this was the ironic part. I was like, I'm an OT and I can't afford me. I was like, what's wrong with this picture? And so, I mean, that's just, that's what struck me as, ironically funny, right? That, a lot of professionals, myself included, will say, oh, you need to get OT or PT or this person or that person or a neurologist or a psychiatrist. It was really hard finding a child psychiatrist. So like just dealing with that was so challenging. I thought to myself, wait a minute, I know how to navigate this system. I worked in hospitals. I know the questions to ask and all that stuff. And I thought, my gosh, what if I was a parent who didn't know any of this? Where would I start? I probably, and I know a lot of parents who have, and me, actually, I could probably include me. Like sometimes I probably get overwhelmed and say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do this later. And then later comes and things aren't getting better. In fact, things are getting worse for your child or worse for you or your family. And then, before you know it, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months go by, and you're like, oh my gosh, the mountain's higher, and now I have to climb even further up it to get help for my child or my family. And so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the healthcare system. And so like that's the compassion and for myself and other parents that I have is like, wow, you know, if you're dealing with all the stuff that your child's dealing with, you're trying to help them, and then you're navigating this system and you're kind of not being regulated while you're navigating this system, right? I mean, it just keeps going on, and you can only have so much money and so much help, which is why, as Leslie said, it takes a village. It takes, I think, parents helping parents out, professionals helping parents out, and also trainings. If we want to get back to the training of DIR, trainings, like Leslie said, if you can train the parents, then they can help their child, not as their therapist, not as, a professional, but as Leslie, is herself has experienced. Once you learn how to do the work and relate in a different way and meet that child where they're at, then maybe it can be a little bit easier until you can figure out all the other things you need to do for them and get all the appointments set up. It's a step in the towards a solution, is what I see it as. And it's not the only solution, and it's not the only thing your child may ever need, but it's a crucial part of the solution, because when you get down to it, I think about the work of people like Ross Green. And he says, kids do well if they can. If they can. And I think he shouldn't just say kids, people do well if they can. Because there's times, as Leslie has said before, where, I'm having a great day and today's pretty good. I think today's pretty good. I'm regulating pretty well right now, but I might get off this podcast and then something happens and I am fully dysregulated. And then I've got to pull myself and have the capacity to pull myself back and say, okay, Melinda, breathe, use your strategies, take a minute. And we're expecting these young children to be able to have that capacity of breathe, use my strategies, take a minute. That's not realistic, and that's where, again, I'm going back to the parent training. That's where it's crucial, because children don't have that capacity. They're not able to have that capacity. So their parents have to have that capacity for them. And they have to help them develop it. But just like anything else, we have to, walk before we run. We have to, sit before we can, stand. Those kind of things, just like those developmental milestones, we have to start at the bottom of the pyramid with these relationships. And it, as moms, and some people are very perfectionistic. I used to be one of those people. I found that my perfectionism kind of had to go out the window when I had all these special needs to take care of, right? and so oh my gosh, look what he did. His whole room's super messy, or my kitchen's like a mess. But you know what? I'm down on the floor with him because he's having a hard time. And I'm going to forget about all this kitchen mess. And I'm going to be with him in this moment and say, okay, you're safe. Mommy loves you. We're going to get through this together. And those are the moments when you're sitting on your kitchen floor and you're looking around like, oh my gosh, this mess, this house, and whatever else is happening. You got to say, okay, mindfulness moment. I've just got to be here with my child. And we both have to regulate and get back to the place where we can say, okay, now what's next?
So I connect so much with what Melinda just shared. And it's beautiful leaving the dishes and just getting down and connecting with your child. And that's really hard on some days. But when you can do it, it's, that it's the most important thing you're doing. I think though, the challenge is when you're in a school setting. I think about the body battery. And I think, the podcast that you had on compliance and regulation, and, your job as a parent is send that kid with as full of a battery as possible. Right. And we really try to do that. But when she's in a school setting where the classrooms are full and they're noisy and she's experiencing challenges, and she's just one of, over 20 kids. That is, her cup's going to fill a lot faster. It's difficult because you can't do much in that setting. You have that IEP, and you can put things in, but I think that, again, the expectations, the demands are just not in line with where children are developmentally at times, and we're asking the impossible of them too. And it's very challenging, because then your child is coming home and you're back at capacity 1, and it's really hard what do you do?
And you go through kindergarten, you go through first and maybe even second grade, and then what happens? Third grade. And third grade is where the rubber meets the road, because then the expectations ramp up academically, and also like regulatory wise, like you have to be more independent, you have to, do independent work, focus, all those things that are challenging for neurodivergent people. And then if they haven't had that background for the motor control and all those things, it's like I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good analogy, but you're trying to, well, you're building on a faulty foundation. There's no it's like inverting the triangle, and you're building on this little point of skills, and you're expecting all this weight to be on top of this little point of a pyramid, upside down pyramid, and you expect it to stay steady and not fall over or not have a challenge. And so yeah, that's just my perspective on things, because I've seen it on a regular basis, and like you said, the challenges are real, and the answers are few and far between because of the structure of the system. I do not blame teachers. I think it's the structure of the system. I mean, let's face it, I think we're really operating off of 1800 educational models, like from the 1800s. I think we need to be a little more 21st century thinking.
Well, I know that in ICL's parent support that I facilitate the weekly support meeting, we now have evening support meetings. Those that are listening and might be interested, affectautism.com/events for the schedule. Probably that's the number one, if not the top, for sure the top 3, if not the number one issue that comes in is concerns around their children at school and their needs not getting met, their support needs not getting met. And it's something that we've barely touched on, but I thank you both for bringing attention to that, so that, it's something that needs to change, and it's been discussed over and over again. And we hope that things will continue to change. I want to direct people to a podcast, Uniquely Human. Barry Prezant wrote the book Uniquely Human. He now has a podcast. It is fabulous, fantastic. I'm trying to catch up on all the ones that I've missed. This episode 81 came out in June, and it really discussed a lot of issues that we talk about. And I just wanted to play a couple clips from this specific episode, which I will reference in the blog post with today's podcast at affectautism.com, and I'll put the link to it here.
David, some of those global comprehension issues are very common among individuals with autism, dyslexia, and ADHD. And it's interesting to me because although these issues of comprehension or capacities for comprehension do improve with time, it is an area that impacts all this group of kids that we're describing, kids with autism and dyslexia and ADHD and a wide range of other learning behavioral differences that are all co-occurring. And comprehension, which requires the highest degree of brain integration, different regions of the brain speaking to other regions of the brain efficiently and well and accurately, that those capacities emerge more slowly, but they do emerge. They emerge more slowly. But because they emerge more slowly, we don't make accommodations for these students who are on a different developmental curve. And then they begin to appear to struggle. And then they develop an internal script that, oh, I'm not a good learner. I don't belong here. I'm different. I'm not as good. And that internal script of who you are and what you are tragically follows a lot of people through their entire lives, even though with the right amount of support and long enough. I always say this too. If you ever want to make someone dependent on you for the rest of their lives, remove support too early. Mm-hmm. And we see a lot of that. We hear a lot about, oh, I don't want to make my child dependent on me. So I'm going to, they need to learn to lift themselves up by their bootstraps, and I'm going to stop helping them. It's sort of a sink or swim mentality. Unfortunately, that makes a bad situation worse, and it can develop an internal script that, oh, I can't do it. I'll never be able to do it. And even worse, when the chips are down and I need help, the person I love most, whether it's your teacher or your parent or somebody else, they abandoned me. They walked away and made me do something that I wasn't ready to do. And we can change all that. These are things we can change in schools, in homes, in clinical settings too.
I wanted to share that piece because I think it's part of why DIR Floor Time spoke to you both and speaks to me and speaks to so many growing number of people, and how important it is to really advocate. And that's something that's going to be an ongoing challenge.
Relating very specifically to what he said, I'm always thinking about, is my daughter regulated? And what we've built into her IEP before she even started kindergarten was an accommodation for her to have sensory, fidget things with her. And also another specific one was the morning drop off, because we know it can be very challenging. And there are mornings that are difficult. And typically that's when things come out about what's going wrong at school. It's right when we're going out the door. And we could be like, we need to get to school. You got to deal with it. We got to get to school. But my understanding of neural development and my understanding of how learning works is that if my child is dysregulated and I am sending her to school in a stressed state, she is not going to be able to engage her prefrontal cortex in a meaningful way that allows her to learn. So the best thing I can do is slow down, connect with her, work it through however we need to. It could be talking about something else. It could be whatever it is. And yes, she gets to school a half hour late sometimes. And I am privileged enough that I have flexibility with work. I can do that. I understand others can't. And I feel so much for them. I know that that is really important. And that's the most important thing I can do to get her set up for hopefully a more successful day. With the sensory toys, that's essential. And her teacher, it was remarkable when we had our first parent meeting last year after 3 weeks of school, said, it's amazing. She uses them appropriately. She is not using them, as a distraction. She uses them when she's having trouble waiting, or when she's, and it actually clues the teacher in that my daughter is feeling stressed. And something that I've tried to emphasize, because they have noted that she, as the year went on, she was using them less. And there was a question that came up at an IEP meeting about, do we need this? And I said, this is the thing, is my daughter is neurodivergent. She's autistic. She's always going to be. Like, this isn't going to change. It's part of who she is. And I don't want you to change it. I don't expect you to change it. But what it means is she struggles at times, and these things are there for her and should be made available for times she needs them. And my hope is that one day my daughter will recognize in herself, I'm not feeling some things, and go to reach for it herself. She still needs some reminders at this point. But I think that's so important that those things quiet her downstairs brain, allowing her upstairs brain to be more online so that she's in a ready state to learn. And that's why I'm so, the accommodations I think are just critical. Don't ever, you're setting your child up to be in the learning brain. Like, she doesn't need to tough it out in the lunchroom without her headphones. It is very loud and dysregulating in there, and it allows her to eat her lunch. When she went without headphones, she wouldn't eat. That's not going to help her stay regulated. So I'm always like, yes, just do what you need to do. I need reading glasses. How am I going to read without my reading glasses?
And Melinda and I both are wearing our glasses to see. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I know you might have something to add, Melinda, but I wanted to play one more clip from the podcast that really speaks to a point Leslie just made.
It's very interesting what we see going on frequently, that we're trying to get kids to learn something. You name the skill, whether it's a social skill or an academic skill or anything in between. But if we're not focusing on emotional regulation first, we can never get to learning. And if we're not focusing on emotional regulation first, kids can't access what they've already learned. So when we focus on the quality of the environment and the relationship, we are then putting not only students in a better position to learn, we're putting parents and teachers in a better position to teach. And so the more we can move towards strategies that focus on fostering healthy, positive relationships, the better students and kids can learn, and the better parents and teachers can teach and be effective in supporting all kids.
Those points were made very well by Dr. Daniel Franklin in the Uniquely Human, the podcast hosted by Barry Prezant and Dave, whose last name I forget. I'm sorry, Dave. Fantastic podcast. I think it basically covered a lot of what we had to say. Did you have any last things to add, Melinda?
I just think that we, myself included, need to go back to those principles of what we've all talked about, of relationship first, connection before compliance. It doesn't say leave compliance out. It's just before, and then I also think about, when you take away all the stress and, oh my gosh, my child, they're not doing what the other children are doing, in the comparisons, and oh my gosh, what are they going to be? Are they going to be a doctor, a lawyer? What are they going to be when they grow up? Really, I don't mean to be negative or morbid, but really, when you get to the end of your life, whenever that may be, the thing that's really going to matter are the relationships and connections you've had with the people in your life, right? So I'm not saying that all these other things of education and learning and being the best person you can be don't matter. But in my opinion, being the best person starts with being a good human in relation with other humans.
I love it. Any last words, Leslie?
That was beautiful, Melinda. I think we can learn so much from these children. And I just, again, I'm so grateful for my daughter, who is she's teaching me all the time. And for any parents out there, I guess what I want to say is, we're in it together, though we're not always able to connect, but I know you guys are out there, and we're all doing the best we can, and we love our children. And I think if we can reframe and really try to get to know our children, really try to get to know them and help others understand them, these kids can do great things in this world. I really do believe that.
Yes, providing opportunities for our children. Well, I can't thank you both enough for being here. I'm so excited to finally have a parent panel podcast. There will be many more coming up, listeners out there. So we're going to get lots of more parent perspectives. I just can't thank you enough. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get 15% off any DIR 101 course, An Introduction to DIR and DIR Floor Time through icdl.com by using the promo code AFFECTA15. That's AFFECTA15.